Welcome back to another episode of the Fumblin Idiot Podcast. What's good, everybody? This is Primo here. Just going to be going over some of the topics. I haven't posted one in about a month or so. I'm going to try to do once a month for now until things ramp up a little more. This episode is going to be about the early learnings of me trying to game design while not being in the game design industry ever, or have never tried game design before, and researching and what that research leads to more than not is a lot of failure, but failure in the sense that it keeps you on the path of growing your knowledge for game design and how to better make the game that you're currently working on, or even help you design a different game that you may be thinking about. Currently, I'm actually thinking about three game projects and then two story projects. So the game projects is Pillars of Magic, which is the card game that I will make, but it's going to be the longest and biggest project. So it is something that will honestly take, if I'm being honest, 4 years, 5 years, because I have to do a lot of play testing. And then after the most challenging part after the most challenging part, which is getting the game to a place where it is skillful, enjoyable, all of those things, is the financial aspect of it, because it is a lot to undertake in the art side of things. It costs a lot of money to make a card game, because each individual card is going to be completely unique art. My game, Pillars of Magic, has 12 different themes of magic, so we have 12 different frame artworks as well. Um, and that's even evolved just in the short year plus that I've been working on creating that game. Second game we're working on is Warp Drive, which is the one that will be the first game completed. That one we have plenty of art and information on the website already for, which is really exciting. It's the one that we play test the most as a group. The third game is called Honeytome instead of Honeycomb. It's a fantasy telling of like a bee colony basically trying to get rid of their current queen and create a new one. So the current queen, her name is Necta. So we're playing into the necromancy theme. Her name is Necta, and she's trying to keep her throne essentially and fend off this colony of bees from taking her royal jelly essentially and giving it to other bees to make them into queens. And it'll be a kind of um, I really am still working on a few ideas for, but in the initial thought, it's going to be a very unique, almost fantasy style chess or checkers kind of game, with a thematic of like Dungeons and Dragons though. So it seems really interesting. I already have the board design in a Photoshop file already, just to help me creatively for that. And then the two story projects, one of the story projects is tied to Warp Drive, which is already currently being made. If you go to our website, you can actually see the first character comic for Praymi Mantister, and we're currently working on iFongs right now. I already have wrote all the nine the character development stories that'll just introduce you to each character, and I'm still writing the main story, which is going to be a very big undertaking, which is very fun, but it's fun stress. I don't, that's how I always tell everyone, just learning this stuff is like a fun stress. It's a completely different type of stress, because I try to overthink things too often, but in the sense of story building, it's helping me not forget things and overlook stuff, which is great. Because sometimes um, you can find gaps in new storytellers' stories, essentially, where they forgot to just even include something in the background or anything along those lines. So it's been a lot of fun. And then the other story idea is completely its own project, but it's three stories in a timeline that is very different than it's a non-linear timeline, and it's a very unique story. I'm not going to talk too much about that one because it's a very unique story, and I would like to keep that one under wraps for a while until we actually get it out there and published, which will be a very long time from now since it's kind of the last project on the list too. So it's that and Pillars will be the last two probably on the list here. But for the theme of this video, the researching fail, research fail, research fail, research fail, like on repeat, what that refers to is just me. I know I talked a little bit in the previous video about how naive I am to a lot of this, which I am. And some of the things I've learned in research has been unbelievably helpful. A lot of the people in the game design community have just been they're so nice and just having a even a short conversation about saying yes or no to an idea. Everyone posts a lot of their ideas as well and ask for criticism, which really has been helping me with my biggest fear of like putting my design out there to have people look at and give me criticism on because in my mind, not being in this space, I don't consider myself a game designer yet. Maybe down the road someday I will, but it makes me unbelievably nervous to publish stuff and make it public knowledge because in my brain it's like someone's going to steal it, but uh, everyone's advice is great. It's harder for someone to copy your idea if you actually put it in the public space and you actually talk about it with other people because then you have actual evidence that you put this out there publicly at a certain date and time, so you can be like, hey, this is my idea, and you're completely copying my idea kind of thing, which you're going to have overlapping games anyway. That's perfectly fine. You need to have your own unique twist to a genre, and not just completely copy someone. So that's great. But a lot of the researching that I've done has come from Reddit forums or game board design forums, things of that nature, which have honestly been really helpful. But I feel like I've only learned probably about 20% of what I need to learn, especially in the publishing aspect. And that's why the time length I originally thought I could have this first game completed, Warp Drive, was way too short in more than one regard. One, I need to genuinely put in enough playtesting time to evolve the game appropriately because obviously the first idea is going to have some base things that are compelling and fun to play with and people will enjoy, but it's going to have other aspects that people just won't enjoy, or they may not dislike it, but they just may not understand it. So like the original version of Pillars of Magic, for example, was honestly awesome, but it was so complicated compared to most card games. It was really hard to teach in a quick timeline. Like for a card games are generally pretty easy to pick up and figure out. And I even originally had it in where you don't have mana cost or anything like resource based cost to your cards, which if you're familiar with card games, most card games do have some type of resource based cost. So I even made it simple enough in that regard, but my board had like three different layers to it, and it was like a very complex kind of board for a card game. It was more of a board game than a card game now looking back on the original design. I've simplified the game enough now and seen those types of design flaws after reading people's just their own thoughts on. I never published anything about that game yet because of the fear I've been talking about putting my ideas out there. Um, but that's something I'll put out when that one has been play tested way more as well. Like I'm about to write a very long post and create YouTube videos this week. I just started just before this podcast actually, creating videos that I'm actually going to post stuff for Warp Drive and actually put it out there publicly, which makes me tremendously nervous. But I know I need to after all of the really good feedback I got from the game design community. So that's where um, for that. But to go back to the research fail kind of thing, that goes everywhere from the game board design, like I talked about for pillars, or art design, which I've honestly spent money on art that I won't need or I'll never use kind of thing in both games already for the Pillars of Magic as well as the Warp Drive. There's just art that we've created that we won't use. And the the downfall of who I am as a person for game design is I do so much better of expanding on on an idea or refining idea to where it is just very fun or just a overall better mechanic or just understanding that something doesn't work by seeing actual art for that idea, which financially is not good because it is very costly to basically cycle through ideas where you most likely won't use, like, just say a good 20 to 30% of that. So that's 20-30% of my budget that I'm spending that is just basically not being used. So I'm spending it because it does help me way more than just having the blank dummy cards that you write on for certain things. The card game, I can write out stuff and I'd be perfectly fine. I have printed cards for that game, but and all those games, all those cards I printed will not be used in the final version of the game, but it drastically helped me figure out major issues with the games. So that's a big flaw in my brain because everyone on these game board forums says the same thing. Don't spend money on stuff that you're going to change, which I completely agree with and I understand, but just how my brain works, when I get an idea and I start working on it or even play testing, but it's just like on dummy cards and stuff like that. It honestly sometimes really takes me a while to refine things or understand that it just doesn't work as a mechanic in a game. Seeing the art for whatever reason, man, it just explodes my brain and I just start understanding, oh, this is a big flaw with this mechanic and I would need to completely change a few other things to make it work. So then I can just scrap that thing and start working on other ideas and refining them, or that may lead me to another idea. But like actually seeing the art itself helps me out more than I could honestly imagine because I have a very good imagination, but for whatever reason just seeing like on the dummy cards where I handwrite like like the first set of Pillars of Magic, for example, where I wrote 500 plus cards all by hand. And now all of those are also wasted time because the game has changed enough where those cards don't even matter. So I wrote 500 cards out, and that took tremendous amount of time and patience, which I do not have my patience for little tedious tasks that need to be done. Like I know it needs to be done. I will do it, but it is like unbelievably painful. But that's where the failing part comes in, but it also is just astronomically helpful in the same sense. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword where I fail a lot of the times is doing something that is not recommended, and I honestly agree with it, but if I spend the money to get art created, it just makes me way better at designing something, or even just like helping thematically. For Pillars of Magic, there's 12 different themed magics. So just writing stuff down on the pen and paper essentially helped me, but I couldn't expand on it more until I actually got to see some artwork done. For example, like the gravity magic, like it was a hard mechanic, or the construct magic was even the hardest one to come up with ideas for, because I don't want them to be copycats of other games. I'm trying to be unique enough in my sense, um, where it's just not a similar game to Magic or another game. It's its own unique game, which I feel like I have a really good design for that, but it just needs to be refined and evolved, and the artwork really helps. So I've already went through a whole different power system testing that out, and it did not work, but it just helped tremendously being able to read the information on the cards printed, plus doing the print quality tests helped me out tremendously. And then the artwork helped me with the design and strategy for the game, and trying to develop that more and more as well. That's the hardest part, um, as a new person trying to game design, is figuring out how to put in strategy where it's not overcomplicated or not too simple, where it's just like a good like a, it doesn't even have to be like the main point of the game necessarily. It's just a relevant part of the game that doesn't make anyone feel overwhelmed by it, which is fantastic. So that's where I've been learning a lot I've been learning since the beginning of the game development journey here, but the past month or so I've been really learning more about, the design aspects and researching things and just understanding things where I am honestly failing as a new uh, potential game designer. That has been helping me tremendously, though. Like, I don't ever think as failing as just failure, as long as I'm using that information to grow in some aspect, which I have been in every part of game design so far, and I'm really happy where we're going. We have so much art and different things posted. We had another great play session for Warp Drive a couple weeks ago, and we have in like another 3 weeks we have another play test coming up, which is great. We're testing some small changes from the last one, which is fun, and everything. So research fail. There's nothing wrong with failing as long as it leads to some sort of growth, and that's where we're going so far. If you stuck through the whole time, I appreciate you listening. Please leave comments, thoughts, anything. If you're a game designer yourself or trying to become one like myself, let me know anything that you've run across that's been tremendously helpful for you, or even just a struggle. Thank you.